everybody. It is Saturday, March 28th, and welcome to my studio. Thanks for coming back again. Day 3 of our stay-at-home order, although it feels like day 300. I'm not sure. I did want to start by saying that I had a couple people yesterday alert me to something that YouTube does that I wasn't aware of. Linda and I'm blanking on the other person. Anyway, thank you for letting me know that YouTube will not allow you to comment on a live video unless you have an account, and they call their accounts channels. So if you try to comment and you don't have a channel, which is just an account, if you click on the little pop-up that says set up a channel, that will just allow you to create an account. If you already use Google products like Gmail or Google Docs or those other things, you probably already have a Google account. You just need to link that to YouTube. If you have a channel, yes, you can post videos if you want to, but it also is a way to store subscriptions. So if you like to watch certain things on YouTube, it's a nice way to just bookmark that. So if you want to leave comments, you do have to have a channel. I apologize, I did not know that, but it's pretty simple. Hi, Mandy, thank you. This is a cozy sweater. No, I didn't make it, but it feels good for, it's not quite spring here. Hi, Michelle. Welcome, you guys. I'm glad you're finding me. And hi, Kit, in Durango. I remember Kit because I do love Durango, Colorado. Hi, Nan. It's good to see you all. And I think, yeah, let's do some weaving, and maybe we can keep ourselves busy. Hi, Wendy. Good to see you. Boulder, right down the road, although so far away right now. Yeah, one of the hardest things this past week was that one of my very favorite places on the planet, which is Shuttles, the yarn store in Boulder. Wendy reminded me of this because she lives in Boulder. Closed. They were going to close at the end of the month, not because they're not doing well, but because they are retiring. Judy and Maggie have been running that store for decades, and so they are retiring, and they deserve to retire, and they did not find the person who could carry on their vision. So they were going to close at the end of the month, and we were going to have a big party. And they had to close on Tuesday because of all the stay-at-home orders. So this is just a shout out and a bunch of love to Maggie and Judy for running Shuttle Spindles and Skeins for so many decades, and I will miss you terribly. I know that Maggie will continue. It's Maggie Casey, the spinning guru. If you all don't know her, look at her books, are fantastic. Go take classes from her. She's going to continue teaching. It's just that I can't go to Boulder and hang out in their yarn shop anymore. So anyway, Wendy, you reminded me of that because of Boulder. I'm glad you all are here. Jocelyn and Karen. Harlan, I'm remembering your question. So we could start with that actually. Marcus, I'm glad you're here. Yay. From Canada, I think, Western Canada, maybe. So yesterday, Harlan asked a question and I want to address it. So he was asking about the bottom spring coil, and I know Harlan's larger question because he's in one of my online classes, but let me switch to, so here's my loom. So Harlan was looking at this loom and seeing that there's no bottom coil here. I have a ton of Mirex looms, and I've been using Mirex for maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, and I have a huge collection because I use them for teaching. That's my excuse that I use them for teaching. But this particular loom does not have a bottom coil, and it's just one of my older ones. I haven't added a coil to it as of yet. I love the bottom coils because they help keep the warp nice and even, but as you can tell, you don't actually have to have a bottom coil. You can set the loom up, just carefully space everything, and I use the stretcher string at the bottom that Mirex recommends. I recommend putting it across 3 or 4 times so that you have something firm at the bottom to beat against. I know some other tapestry weavers like, I think Kathy Ted Hooker does this, and some other people who use Mirex a lot will actually put some sticks at the bottom woven in, which gives you something nice and firm to start your tapestry on. So the only reason, Harlan, that I don't have a bottom spring on this loom is that it's one of my older ones and it was free and it was empty. I mean, I needed a loom and this is the one I grabbed and it didn't have a spring. So I actually, let's see if I can make this happen. Okay, I actually prefer having the bottom spring on a Mirex loom. And oh, let me show you. I did pull out this loom. Let's see if you can see this. This is a Lanny loom, so if you're trying to envision what the bottom spring would look like, this is the nearest loom I could find that had one. So the spring goes in this tray that's just stuck on to the loom. And then, of course, there is a tray and a spring at the top. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. You guys, Texas. Harlan, let me know if that answered your question or not. Now I'm not actually sure exactly what the question was, but also know that the delay is about 30 seconds on the YouTube thing. So if I seem disjointed, it's because I'm seeing your comments 30 seconds or more after you wrote them. Oh, and Marilyn, I am going to talk about the 2 sets today. Oh, Wendy, I'm sorry. Wendy is from Boulder, and she's saying that she could walk to Shuttles from her house. Now, that would be dangerous. If I could walk to Shuttles from my house, I would probably have just lived there. Leslie's here from Alberta, Nevada, Delaware, Windsor, Ontario. Hi, Robin. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Harlan. So back to the Mirex thing. If the warp gets in a different dent at the top and the bottom, is that a problem? So basically, let me go back here to this. So basically, Harlan's asking if I have a coil down here and a warp is in one coil here, does it have to match the coil at the top? And the answer actually is yes. It doesn't have to match, like you don't have to count exactly from the edge and put it in the exact same dent. What has to happen is that the warp has to go straight from the bottom to the top without crossing the warps next to it. It is a problem if they cross. They need to be lined up vertically. It's, you know, if they're crossed and you can move them to the bottom under the stretcher string, it's not such a big deal, but they do need to be aligned top to bottom. Michelle says she ordered a Mirex saffron loom on Wednesday and she hopes it comes. So next week I'm going to break out my saffron and I'll show you all. I've got a project to do on that. Wendy's asking, how do you remove the bottom spring when advancing the warp? So if you're weaving on a loom like this, and imagine, oh wait, I put a picture in here. Hold on, I have technology to help with this. I think this one. So here's an example of a picture that I have advanced the warp over. So notice that the spring is not here in this picture. You have to remove the spring when you advance the warp because you don't want the fabric going over this warp coil because it will crush the warp coil. So you have to take it out. So the answer there, Wendy, is that you loosen this warp quite a lot. So you just turn these screws on the side, loosen it quite a bit so it's floppy. And then you're going to grab one side of the warp coil. Let me take this out. You're going to pretend there's a coil here. Sorry, I don't have a loom with a coil that I can show you this on, but so this is floppy. You're going to grab both sides of the coil and sort of bring it backwards and then work it out without letting go. Work it out of it'll grab the warps and you want to work it out. So then you're going to be reaching behind and pulling that coil out and then tighten, move your thing around so that, oops. Where's that other one? So then you can advance the thing around and then tighten your screws back up. Sure, Leslie. She wants to know why I'm weaving this piece from the front. Oh, Mandy. So Mandy lives in St. Louis, and it used to be that the Loopy U was in St. Louis. So if you follow my blog, you know that the Loopy U is one of my favorite yarn stores. It's in Fort Collins. It used to be in St. Louis. So it moved from Mandy to me. I'm sorry, Mandy. It's such a great place. I really love the Loopy U. So she says she was feeling that way when the Loopy U moved, the same way I feel about Shuttles closing. Hi, Michelle. Glad you're here. She said she got lost in designing her next piece, so that's good news. So, Robin, this is a good question. It will shoot me right into what I want to talk about, to the weaving, I mean. Robin asked, do you have a cartoon behind the warp, and how do you attach a cartoon? So let's look at this weaving, because we're supposed to be weaving anyway. Here's my cartoon. And so on this Murex, this is what I do. So there's 2 layers of warp on a Murex, and this is sized. Of course, it's this exact size I want to weave. There are many people who weave like this. They keep their cartoon right behind, and they probably don't mark the cartoon on here, and that's fine. Oops, I'm sorry. Let's see if I can. Okay. They don't mark their cartoon on the warp, and that's fine. You can keep your cartoon behind without marking it. It's just more accurate. To me, I'm used to doing it this way, so I like to mark it on the warp. So when I'm doing this, I am lining up the way I want it, and then I'm using, hold on, sorry. I'm using T-pins, and a T-pin looks like this. It's a strong, it's just a strong sewing pin that I use to, so say I hadn't woven any of this, I would align this cartoon where I wanted it and then stick this pin into, this is the waist at the bottom. And then I would do that on both sides, and I would mark on my cartoon. You can also use rare earth magnets. Those work really well. I don't happen to have any, but they're super, super strong magnets that you can put one on each side, and it will hold the cartoon in place. Some people use that when they're weaving. They just use the magnets and they don't stitch on or anything. Other people will put the cartoon on and stitch it with basting stitches, and that will hold it there, and they will just weave with it there. One of the reasons I don't do that, that would probably work well for me, except that I can't stand that sound of the paper, the beater hitting the paper. So I don't do it that way. Okay, so I hope that answered your question, Robin, that I'm marking it on here. I'm also referring to it, though. I keep my cartoon close because the dots are not that accurate, and I want to make sure I'm getting the shape the way I want it to be. Hi, Karen, the Isle of Skye. That's super cool. Debbie Santola laminates her cartoon, which is a good idea. That keeps it nice and firm. Faith, that's a good question. I'm actually, hold on, I'm gonna make a note. She's asking about the saffron loom. I will address that on a different day, Faith, but it's a good question. Whether you can keep the saffron loom from twisting or not, or how to manage them. And yes, I do think she's laying it flat while warping does actually help. That's how I've been doing it, Faith. Oh, Michelle says doll pins. So there's another great idea. She says she struggled with using magnets, but I think doll pins are long and strong pins, right? Is that what I'm thinking, that they're actually fairly long? I don't know exactly what they are, Michelle, but I'm pretty sure that if you Googled doll pins, you would find that. And that's also a great idea. When I was in France, they use these super long, they're like this long pins they're sort of sharp. They're thicker than sewing pins, but they stab it through the weaving and then pull the cartoon up to the weaving to check what they're doing. So that's an interesting idea. Kate says what about doing the cartoon on fabric, which I think if it was stiff, it would be fine. I think people use a lot of like vellum kinds of papers that are more like fabric. I just think having the cartoon fairly stiff, just so it stays where you want it to be, it seems to me that fabric would be too floppy, but I don't really know if you were hanging it like on a Murex, it might work great. On a horizontal loom, I don't think it would work. Oh, Michelle says, just like I'm using. Her husband used to use them for props in films. Cool. Way to use what you've got. Okay, so I was going to talk about the two sets of this piece. And someone asked also, oh God, I can't remember what that question is. So if you ask something about this cartoon, ask it again because I've lost it already. The two sets are, this part is at 16 ends per inch and this part is at 8 ends per inch. And I don't know, I might be able to loosen this camera and show you. So here's the top of the loom. And you can see I have it warped with 2 warps in each dent. And this is 12/6 cotton seine twine, so it's thin. So that gives me, because I'm doubling it for a bunch of the piece, I wanted it to be thinner warp. So I have it warped like that at the top, and the heddles are warped for 8 ends per inch. So I have all the way across 8 ends per inch with the heddles. I, in another life, have done warping where, in another life, years ago, I did a thing where I had 2, Murex I think had a weave along about this, where I had 2 shedding devices on, and I could have done that for this. It would have been really helpful, but I could not find, I have a shedding device with the old plastic clip. Some of you will remember that, which you can take on and off without taking the loom apart. And I'd already warped the loom before I thought of, oh, I should use 2 shedding devices. I couldn't find the plastic clip. So I'm using a different way of picking up the shed for the 16 ends per inch. So the shedding device is set for the 8 ends per inch, just like normal. So this section and this section. But this section doesn't have the shedding device set up to weave at 16 EPI. So one way to do that is just the way I weave on like the little lap looms, is to use, this is just a double pointed knitting needle that I have in one of the sheds. It just makes it faster. So when I'm weaving this part, I can, if I am back on which shed I'm doing, I can just put the shed stick in quickly instead of picking each thing. And then the bubbling, of course, is different for 16 EPI also, because everything is different when you're using a different yarn and a different set. You just have to adjust. If I was using a bobbin, I wouldn't have to pick up and put down a tool all the time. Something I'm going to talk about in May's module in the design class is how tools affect how we weave also. I think it's an interesting question. And then I can kind of shove that out of the way when I'm coming back in the other direction. So there's going to be a little flower in here. So I'm leaving this little cradle. Here, let's see if I can zoom this in for you. I hope that you all are weaving, and one of the things about doing this I realized right away yesterday is that I really wish I could talk to you live and see what you're weaving. So I don't have a real good tech solution for that, but look at that. I started talking and I put it in the wrong shed. But I'll keep thinking about how we could share what we're working on, because I think that would be really fun to see what you guys are doing. Oh yeah, Karen asked why I'm weaving from the front. That was it, Karen. Thanks. Thanks for helping me with my memory. Oh, so Gail said use a cloth cartoon with a stick along the bottom. That seems like a great idea, Gail. You could leave the cloth as a cartoon behind, have a stiff stick in the bottom of the cartoon, which would sort of hold it down. I think that's a great idea. And then I wouldn't hear that tapping of the paper, which I think would help. So right, Kate, there's no heddles at all in this section. There are heddles. So let me move this down. They're heddles, but they are set for 8 and not 16. So I can't use them to weave this section. And I did that because, of course, the section is moving. If I had just a square section that had 16 and 8, I could have put the heddles on this bar at 16. But this, the 8 EPI section is going to move all the way over in here and all the way over in here. So I couldn't put the heddles like that without having 2 separate shedding devices. Okay. So the yarn I'm using in this section is Weaver's Bazaar 18-2, and it's just 1 strand at 16 ends per inch. And Karen asked why I'm weaving from the front. And this is that question, age-old question that I get all the time. Why do I weave from the front? Why do I weave from the back? On my big tapestries, I weave them all from the back. And I do that because that's how I learned, basically. My teacher was James Kohler for the most part. I have taken classes from other people, but I was his apprentice for several years. And he wove from the back. Partly we are both from New Mexico. There's a lot of eclectic weaving traditions in New Mexico, and James kind of put together his weaving style from both Navajo and Rio Grande weavers. And my first tapestry teacher was Karen Martinez at Northern New Mexico Community College, who is a Rio Grande weaver. So think about if you've ever been to Chimayo, New Mexico, those sorts of Hispanic weavings are like Irvin Trujillo and Lisa Trujillo do, and the Ortegas. Those are the style that I first learned tapestry weaving in. And for whatever reason, they actually all weave from the front. So for whatever reason, James weaves from the back, probably because he was aware of French styles, which they all weave from the back. And James liked to follow the rules in some regards. So I don't know what his reasons were. I never asked him, but he taught me weaving from the back. So my brain, all I'm saying is that my brain developed weaving from the back, and I learned to weave tapestry, this kind of tapestry, that way. And so became a habit, and I really like it. My brain enjoys the challenge of weaving from the back. However, if you are a student of Archie Brennan, you will have heard him say something about weaving from the back is driven by technique, and weaving from the front is driven by image. And I actually think there's a lot of truth to that. My large pieces are very abstract. And weaving from the back allows me to use techniques that are harder to use from the front. They're not even necessarily harder, they're just slower, like regular hatching and double weft interlock. So a lot of my first pieces had a ton of regular hatching in them, and that is a lot easier to do from weaving from the back. So anyway, to make a forever story shorter, when I started doing my tapestry diaries on little tiny things, it's far easier on a small loom to weave from the front. So I started doing those from the front, and they're all, well, a lot of them are abstract also, but this piece I consider as part of my tapestry diary because it's so different in my head, the tapestry diary is this experimental thing where I'm doing a bunch of little tapestries just for fun. And this piece is part of that. I've never woven something like this before, and it's image based, so easier to see what I'm doing weaving from the front. There's no technique reason for me to weave this piece from the front. I could do everything that I'm doing here from the back, but so I guess at the end of the day, Karen, I don't have a really good answer for why I'm weaving this from the front versus the back. Here's this. Can you see? You can't see that. I'm using this little shed stick. So this is a trick if you're using small looms. Use a double pointed knitting needle, works really well. This is probably like a size 1 or a size 2 double pointed knitting needle. Someone left me their fiber stash when they died. She was a client of mine when I worked in rehab, and she taught me how to tat. And after she died, I got this big box of stuff from her niece who had cleaned out her house. And it included scads of metal knitting needles. So I have a good stash, but I think some of the craft stores have these just plain metal ones. They're not fancy and they're super cheap. I think Susan Bates makes them. They work great for this. So use them on your small looms for to hold open one shed. So I'm never taking this needle out. It's just holding this shed open. I'm moving it out of the way because I have room on this loom. On other looms, you probably don't have room to move it, but it just means that one of the 2 sheds is faster to find. Yeah, Kate, exactly. There's no, I think I talked about that. There's no heddles in this 16 EPI section. Yes, Kate, and I think Kate is also talking about using Zoom so we can share stuff. And I am looking at that, Kate. The problem with Zoom is there's a limit of 100 people, and there are 96 people on this call right now. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what I can do with Zoom. So sure. Can I describe how I go from 8 to 16 EPI and back? So yeah, great question. So right here, this black line is the edge of the 16 EPI. And just here, let's see if I can, I don't know that I can zoom in anymore. Yeah, I can. Can you see? So right here, I just moved this black over right there, and there's a free warp right there. So this is the split of the 8 EPI. So let me put this next one in, and I think you might be able to see what I'm doing here. Here, let me move this black one out of the way. Okay, so I have a free warp hanging out there, and it's just one, but when I move the 8 EPI part over, I am splitting that warp. So I'm going to go like this. So that's the doubled warp, but I also want to grab, oh, hold on. Yes, okay. I want to grab one more here. So I'm actually splitting the warp as I move over the 8 EPI part, and this fluffy yarn sort of covers up it doesn't look messy because this yarn is fluffy, and it kind of covers up the fact that I've split the warp in a little bit of a weird way. And then if I go back, I have to pick that one, and then this can go back in this shed. And that fluffy yarn will cover if I'm careful. So let's see, and I made a mistake here. So I am doing a cutback here. And I don't know, can you see it in the picture? Let me back out a little bit. So you can see here I've got what's called a cutback. They're sometimes called lazy lines. I wanted some kind of interest in this bottom part, but I didn't want to make it too difficult to weave. I didn't want to make this piece too complicated. So I made a lazy, I'm using cutbacks here to sort of fill in that space. So now these build up way faster because this yarn is fluffier. So I may want to go over one more here. So I'm not going to put that yarn across yet until I weave up a little bit more of this area. So Michelle, I agree with you. Michelle says it's good, at least for me, to know how to weave from both directions. And I can't tell you how often that has come in handy for me. If I'm weaving on, say you're weaving on a copper pipe loom that you can just flip over, and I mean a copper pipe loom like this, which I have yet to finish this piece also, but this is just a plain old easy copper pipe loom. There's directions for it in some of my classes. I can weave from the back. So if there's a technique that I want to use, like regular hatching or double weft interlock or something, I can just flip the loom over it and weave it backwards. But I think it's also helpful, depending on what your image is, to be able to weave from the back. Anne, I'm glad you're here. Missy says Goodwill has gads of them. Missy, I've lost what you were referring to, but yes. Harlan says, I'm using meet and separate in your weaving. Why? Does it have anything to do with where your ends end up, back versus front? Absolutely does not have anything to do with the ends. It has to do with the way that tapestry works. If I don't use meet and separate, let's see if I can switch these. So if I don't use meet and separate, anytime, if these were going in the same direction, I would have to put two wefts in the same shed to move one over the other. If you're doing a piece and everything is in square blocks, you could do it without meet and separate, except when you come to the top of the block, if you want to move a color over, you'll have two wefts in the same shed, and it doesn't work. So meet and separate is one of the most important concepts for this kind of image creating tapestry, and I use it 99% of the time. It doesn't work for a few things like pick and pick, but in general, meet and separate is an all the time thing. It's not a question. It's just you always use meet and separate. And that is, I go into depth in that in the course. So warp and weft course. Hi, Sherry. Glad you're here. Hope California's good. Okay, good idea. Email me about the Zoom thing, because I think that is the direction I'm going. So I want to have a way that we could share what we're working on. And I can use this same program with Zoom. So, and I can still stream it on YouTube. So all of those options would still work. I think perhaps, yep, my camera battery just died, you guys, which means that I've been on for half an hour. My other camera. Oh, Lisa asked, good question, Lisa. So, well, let's see if this actually did die. Oh, maybe not. Okay. So Lisa asked why I removed the silk I did yesterday. My intention was to, before I got on camera, was to finish this and build this up. And, oh yeah, my camera battery just died. I'm sorry, you guys. My intention was to finish what I did yesterday and build up the area under it and have it finished and keep weaving so that I could show you something new. And I didn't get there. So, but I will be weaving today, so I will show you tomorrow. I took it out because I hadn't finished the line. Like, I put the line into demo, but I hadn't finished the area that needed to be outlined. So, yes, I'm going to make a couple notes. Jocelyn, I'll talk about cutbacks again tomorrow when I have a new battery in my camera, and I will show you on here. Oh, Missy, thank you. Goodwill has scads of these metal knitting needles. Goodwill, great tip. They were very popular in the 50s, 60s, 70s, probably the 80s. So, and they're way cheaper than the good knitting needles that you would knit on. Although you can use regular ones from the yarn store too. Thanks, Karen. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Oh, what kind of pen do I use so the ink doesn't bleed? Michelle, use a, I have one right here. Look at this. So Sharpie now makes this pen. It says Sharpie Industrial Super Permanent Ink. I believe I got a box of these at the office supply store, Office Depot. These are a newer thing for Sharpie, and they are supposedly good to 500 degrees. So the old Sharpies, you know, the regular Sharpies is what I used to use, and Sharpie has said that they're no longer guaranteeing that they are permanent. So get this one that's called Industrial, Sharpie Industrial Super Permanent. Because, and I use these because I steam my piece. And the steamer is really hot. And for example, in the little bits where the flowers are here, that's white, and it's only one strand of Weaver's Bazaar 18-2. So if I had black Sharpie in there and I got it and I steamed it and that black Sharpie ran, I would see it in that white part of the weaving and I would be very sad. So make sure that your Sharpie doesn't run. Kathy Todd Hooker recommends actually putting the Sharpie on a white fabric or something and getting it wet and making sure it doesn't run, like every single marker she tests. So if you're doing very fine things, I think Kathy is onto something there. Oh, Marcia. So Marcia's asking why I'm using 3 blue wefts, and she means in this area. I have 3 going. So that, Marcia, just was a consequence in this particular case of lower down I had, when I was putting in those flowers, I needed more wefts, and I kept them going in meet and separate, and I just didn't take any of them out. As I get farther up here where it gets narrower, I'll drop 2 of those and I'll just have 1. The other reason to have multiple wefts is to keep your piece from drawing in. Gives a little space in there and keeps the piece from getting narrower. Okay. Okay, Kate, good deal. Yeah, I will look at the webinar or meeting option on Zoom, because that would allow at least some of you who use Zoom to share what you're weaving, and that might be really fun. So thanks, you guys. I have taken more of your time than I intended. I really, really hope that you're able to weave. I will be here tomorrow, even though it's Sunday, and hopefully I will have woven a bunch of this by tomorrow, and you can jump on and weave with me. So, and then next week I have some other looms we can look at. I did finally get the shacked loom. It arrived. So I can show you what that looks like at some point. And I hope you are doing well. Stay safe, stay home. Watch the late night hosts that are all broadcasting from their living rooms with their children climbing on them. It's kind of funny. Also, clearly, some of those men do not know how to do makeup because they look awful. And Trevor Noah looks great, as always. So if you want someone who is both funny and smart, I've been enjoying watching Trevor Noah's Instagram feed. So thank you all. That was a necessary side note. I will see you tomorrow. Go weave something, and I will weave, and I'll show you what I'm doing tomorrow.